Peace to the family. It's Free Inhabitant. Back at you. This is December 15th, 2018. December 15th. This is 2018. I got the brother, English National Grand Sheik, Clifford Jefferson L. Bay from the house of Geoffery. Back with me here again. He is my Sheik, my Grand Sheik. And today we're going to talk to you about paying rents by status enforcement of, as well as Article 1, Section 10 of the National Constitution. So first of all, I want to just also say too, please do not try this at home if you do not know status and law. If you don't know law and status, please do not try this at home, what we're about to show you here today. But first, the English National Grand Sheik, he gonna take you back in lieu of property, because this is dealing with property, you know, from whence all this stuff were governed under, you know, the king. So he gonna drop some history on that right here today, and explain to you, you know, where all this stuff originated from, and what proper status that we as a people need to be in order to be able to claim property in allodial. See, because a lot of people right now is they're not doing it like the English Grand National, you know, Grand Sheik is. He's doing a very viable feat here in these courts. I mean, and he got them asking for, you know, for his documents so that they could study this stuff. Because obviously these judges going into the chambers and reading that stuff and studying that stuff, because they know obviously the validity that where he's speaking in court, as a few of these attorneys said, it weighs truth on the matter. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you now on to the English National Grand Sheik, Jefferson L. Bay. Please take it away.
Islam. Islam.
Islam.
Islam. Peace, my brothers and sisters. My brothers and sisters who are English nobles. Yes, sir, we are descended from the ancient tribes from time immemorial. I'm going to give you a little history. I'm going to give you examples. And I'm going to give you the evidence to support who you are as English nobles. A better name to identify yourself is English, Corsican, Anglo-Saxon burghers. That's a good title, and you can look that up yourself to come into a broader understanding of your identity yourself. I'm going to start this lecture off on property, real property. But you have two types of property. You have movable and non-movable. In order for you to deal with the real property, movable, non-movable, you must have property dealing with personal property, dealing with yourself, i.e. your status. I'm going to say it again. Your status. Because in order to own property, you must be able to use it, kick people off of it, or transfer it. So in order to do that, you must be a flesh and blood. You must be a natural person. So I'm going to show you that what people have been trying to do for years, it does work. But you first must know yourself. So I'm going to do this by, once again, setting the record straight. I must inform you that I suffer from epilepsy and seizures. So I might slur a little bit, might stutter, but what I say is true, in fact. As you know, if you watch the Hobbits from what they call the Lords of the Ring, you notice that every time Frodo went into a trance, i.e. a seizure, he comes back with this great information. So now, I didn't know this information until I had this seizure. And it's very important to understand that our bodies take over when you put yourself on the same frequency, or what I should say, the right frequency. Getting in tune with yourself, because you are what your forefathers were, without doubt, a contradiction. So many of us has been taught that we are somebody who we're not, because why? We can't prove it. You need historical records to prove who you are. And most of the information that we see were from people who didn't live in the times of the eras when these records were wrote. Because he who writes your books sets your timeline. So I'm going to let the people who wrote these books prove it, that what I'm saying is right and exact. So let's first go to English land law. Because we understand that the land here in America is governed by what they call charters. And charters were issued by what they call letter packs or land packs. And there's many types of security interests dealing with land. And most of them that are dealing with today in this day and time are based off leases. They are based off possession, but they're not secure. In order for there to be a security in an interest or a lease, i.e. contract, you must give consideration. And we, as the indigenous people here in North America, do not receive any consideration. Why? Because they got us acting as commerce. We're legal fixings. Look up the term common recovery, and you will understand what I mean. But check this information out. We're going to go to English land law. It says here, English land law is a law of real property, and in England and Wales. Because of its heavy historical and social significance, land is usually seen as the most important part of English property law. Ownership of the land has its roots in the Anglo-Saxon system of bookland, and in the Anglo-Saxon multiple estates, a feudal system transformed by William the Conqueror and his influx of many new chief landlords after 1066. So if you realize what happened in my last lecture, I just gave you a brief of the time of England when it was transferred from England to that of Norman France. So now we're going to go deep and really get a real grasp about who we are, about the kings and queens who lived at that particular time. If you go to Noah Ali's Prophecies and Hadith, it clearly states in, I think it's point 80, or question number 80, it clearly states that the Moors are descendants of the kings and queens. It clearly says we are descendants of kings and queens. Now, the only time I know that kings and queens existed was in England. Because in the other countries, they didn't use those English terms. They actually described it from their own language, based off their own culture. So now, you want to understand why he called us that, because, once again, as I showed you in my last lecture, that the Berber tribes were the tribes that were living in the time of the Anglo-Saxons, which was the kingdom of England. But as I go down further, it says ownership of land has its roots in the Anglo-Saxon system of bookland, and in the Anglo-Saxon multiple estates, a feudal system transferred by William the Conqueror and his influx of many new chief landlords after 1066. If you want to know more about that, look up what they call the Doomsday Book. Doomsday Book dealt with the land was actually broken up at the time of William the Conqueror when he came to his power. So now, let's go back in time more. Let's really go back in time and see what it is that we're missing about who we are. So the first thing, we're going to go to the time of what they call Julius Caesar, when our ancestors were known as the Endicati. Let's see it for ourselves. Give my phone a little time to boot up. I want to act crazy sometimes, but I apologize for that. Okay, here we go. Andy-Carvey, or Andes. I'm gonna blow it up. First of all, let me do let me get the part of it where it's kind of distorted. Part itself of that. Okay, we can actually make out what I want. The Andy-Carvey. Andy-Carvey or Andy is in Julius Caesar heirloom. Part itself more. I can't make that word. I can't make that word.
Ain't no way we can take that off the.
I'm trying to see now.
At the top, how you did it.
This man's giving me that option now. There's usually a space in the box up there that allows you to do that, but unfortunately, I don't see it there. So, well, basically, it says it right here, at this paragraph right here at the bottom. It says, the Andy-Carvey, they gave their name to the Comte Anjou called the Andy-Carvey. So, as you see in my last lecture, I mentioned the house of Anjou, which was the house of Andy-Carvey. So, let's hit that. Comte Anjou. That's a little better. It says Anjou is a historical province of France, straddling the lower River. It is the capital was Anger, and it was roughly coexisted with the diocese of Anger. Okay, now let's go down a little bit further. It says, the region takes its name from the Celtic tribes of Andy-Carvey, who submitted to Roman rule following the Gallic Wars. Under the Romans, the chief fortified settlement of Andy-Carvey became the city of Jula Magnus, the future Agnes. Let's go a little further. Go down to history. Okay, it says, Odo the Folks. Odo acceded to the throne of France in 888, but he seems to have already delegated the country between the Maine and the Mayenne to Angular as a viscount or count around 870, possibly owing to the connection of his wife Adelise of Amboise. Their son Folk the Red succeeded to his father, holding in 888. Is mentioned as a viscount after 898. It seems to have been granted or usurped the title of count by the second quarter of the 10th century. His descendants continued to bear that rank for 3 centuries. He was succeeded by his son Folk II, the Good. Excuse me. Author of the Proverbs that an unletting king is a wise ass in 938. He was succeeded in turn by his son Geoffery I around 958. So once again, we know that the term Jefferson in Old English is pronounced Godfrey. So now we have just associated the term, the tribes called Andy-Carvey with the tribes called Anjou. And they were living throughout the time of Julius Caesar. So now, first of all, this time frame, according to the Gregorian calendar, dealing with the Andy-Carvey, comes out to be the year 57 BC. But once again, how could it be BC when the Gregorian calendar wasn't initiated till 1582 by Pope Gregory XIII? So that meant that there was no Julius Caesar, because the only calendar that was existing at that particular time was the Bourbon calendar, and the Julians used that calendar, the Bourbon calendar. So it just shows you that all the tribes who existed throughout the time of what we call BC were actually Berber tribes. The so-called invaders of the Anglo-Saxon Berber tribes wanted to write themselves in history, so they created a timeline for themselves. And that timeline wasn't recorded till the year 1582. Okay, so now it mentions here Godfrey the First. So who is Godfrey the First? Because apparently he's of historical significance. So we're going to type that in right quick and find out who this gentleman, or house that this gentleman comes from. Let's type this in, the house. Oh. I'm a bad speller. It's slow, brothers and sisters. I apologize for that. Right here. The house of Chat-Tir-Dun. The house of Chat-Tir-Dun is a medieval lineage that once possessed the Viscount of Chat-Tir-Dun, the county of Perth and the county of Anjou. Origin of the house. It says the house of Chat-Tir-Dun descended from Godfrey the First, or what we say, Geoffery the First, whom Count Theobald of Blois made Viscount of Chat-Tir-Dun in 956. Recent research makes him a direct line agnatic descendant of the Frankish family Rogonides. For a list of the Count of Viscount of Chat-Tir-Dun, see the articles of Count of Chat-Tir-Dun. Let's go to genealogy here. Can you see that, brother?
Mm-hmm.
It says, it is not clear whether Hughes, Archbishop of Tours, and Adolud of Chateau-Chinon are grandsons of Geoffrey I of Chat-Tir-Dun. Some sources say that Geoffrey had a son called Hugh, who was himself Viscount of Chat-Tir-Dun, and both Archbishop of Tours and the Lord of Chateau-Chinon would in turn be his sons. Let's go to the genealogy. Here is the actual graphs of the house of Chat-Tir-Dun. As you can see, Geoffrey I, Viscount of Chat-Tir-Dun, 986. So these are all the so-called line genealogy of Geoffrey I. Now we just said that the house goes back to the time of Julius Caesar, which was the time of 57 BC. But remember, 57 BC did not exist because there was a Gregorian calendar till 1582 by Pope Gregory XIII. At that particular time, they were using the Berber calendar, was actually the year 894 BC, i.e. Berber calendar. So in this graph, you see all the so-called kings. Hugh, Geoffrey I and II, Folkowitz, Hugues de Perche, all these dates. Well, let's get to a specific date that I really want to get into. Because we understand that the house of Anjou, which was known as Antiquary back in the time of Julius Caesar, became known as what they call the House of Plantagenet, ruled by Geoffrey the Fifth, pardon himself. So here you see Geoffrey V of Plantagenet, Count of Anjou, from 1113 to 1151. You can also see here, as we just read from County Anjou, we went to history and as well as the House of Chat-Tir-Dun, which we're doing now, that they mentioned the gentleman by the name of Folk. So as we see here, Folk the Fifth and Folk I don't know if they mean by the sixth or probably the sixth, ruled in 1089 to 1143, Count of Anjou of the King of Jerusalem. You see, it passed to Geoffrey V of Plantagenet, which we just said, who was the King of Jerusalem. Did you hear me, Moors? He was the King of Jerusalem. So now, why would they be describing Jerusalem in the Middle Ages, when according to the stories that were created in BC, according to the Bible, they mentioned Jerusalem as well. But there was no time chart, there was no calendar to support those stories. So all those stories were created by so-called folklore that was created by so-called people who claimed to be descendants of the kings of England, started from 927 to 1706. So the kingdom of England was ruled by what we call Asherton. Asherton, as we're going to read about, was descendant of King Alfred the Great. Let's go to that. First, we're going to go to Geoffrey I. We just read about Geoffrey I. We read about Geoffrey V, Count of Anjou. We understand that he comes from the House of Plantagenet. He was the father of Henry II, who was the son of John I, who signed the Magna Carta in 1215. Once again, we know that Geoffery V was the Count of Anjou, whose son was called Henry II, whose son was called John I, who signed the Magna Carta in 1215. Okay, so now we want to go to, we mentioned in Jerusalem, right? We're talking about Jerusalem. So now, I don't know if you brothers and sisters watched The Kingdom of Heaven, but if you watch that movie, it just came out. I'm not sure, 2016, 2017. But in this movie, it shows you that Balaam was a blacksmith. His father was named Geoffery of Eblan. And the king of Jerusalem, known at that time, was called Baldwin IV. Yeah, yes, actually Baldwin IV. So Baldwin IV came to a line of Baldwins. You have Baldwin the first, you have Baldwin the second, you have Baldwin the third, you have Baldwin the fourth. So now, let's look up Baldwin the fourth. Type him in. Okay, here we go, brothers and sisters. Baldwin. This is Baldwin the Fourth of Jerusalem. So we understand that we just read that the king of Jerusalem was actually ruled from a line of Geofferys. Geoffery the first, when it was known as Chapter-Doom, but when it came up to Geoffery the fifth, the name changed to the house of Plantagen, which was still known as the kingdom of Jerusalem. And Baldwin the first was a line of Baldwins, which come up to what we call now Baldwin the fourth, who we're talking about. And when you get to the movie Kingdom of Heaven, this is why you see that this Kingdom of Heaven, Baldwin the who was the king, you get into the history of Saladin, the Ottoman nomadic burghers. And he was called Baldwin the Fourth, but he had leprosy. Why? Because we're going to read about it. It says Baldwin, Fritz, Baldwin, 1161 to 16th of March, 1185, called the leper, or the leper king, reigned as the king of Jerusalem from 1174 until his death. He was the son of Alrak of Jerusalem and his father's wife Agnes of Courtney. Go down a little further. Let's go down to it says, Baldwin spent his childhood in his father's court in Jerusalem, having little contact with his mother, Agnes of Courtney, Countess of Jaffa and Ascalon, and later Lady of Sidon, whom his father had been forced to divorce. Baldwin IV was educated by the historian William of Tyre, later Archbishop of Tyre, and Chancellor of the kingdom, who made a disturbing discovery about the prince. He and his friend were playing one day and attempted to injure each other by driving their fingernails into each other's arm. But Baldwin felt no pain. William immediately recognized this as a sign of serious illness, but it was not conclusively identified as leprosy until a few years later. The onset of puberty accelerated his disease in the most serious lepromatous form. It says, go ahead. As a leper, Baldwin was not expected to reign long as produced as an heir, and courtier and lords positioned themselves for influence over Baldwin's heirs. His sister Sibylla and his half-sister Isabella. Sibylla was being raised by her great aunt Livetta in the convent of Bethany, while Isabella was at the court of her mother, the dowager Queen Maria Carmina Nablus. Okay, so now we established, and I brought you to the understanding that Baldwin IV was the ruler of Jerusalem. They told you this move. They told you this is the move in Kingdom of Heaven, and he was a leper, as you know, based off him playing this game with whoever he was playing the game with. But if you notice that Baldwin IV was ruling Jerusalem, then he came to a descendants of Baldwin. So let's go to Baldwin I, because we're going to show you that the Kingdom of England was linked to the Geoffery family by way of Issues II, who was a son of Goda, or what we call Godifa, we're going to go to that, but I want to give you a timeline so that you can research it for yourself. So we just established that the Andi-Kabi, known as the Anju, existed all the way from 57 BC, which was actually the time 894 AD. And we also established that the Andi-Kabi was called Anju, which was also called the Angevin, which was known as the House of Plantagenet, which ruled from the first beginning was Geoffery I till Geoffery V, when they switched to what they call the House of Plantagenet. Now, if you know anything about the House of Plantagenet, they began to break down, which was called the War of the Roses, between the Tudors and what they call the Lancasters. So now, what's so important about this family is that they were trying to break this family up because they were trying to keep the family established between the lineage and the lineage of the kings of England. Now let's go to Baldwin the First. Okay, Baldwin the First, also known as Baldwin of Bologna. Part yourself, boy. That's a crazy name. It says, was the first count of Edessa from 1098 to 1100, and the second Crusader ruler and the first king of Jerusalem from 1100 to his death. Being a younger son, he was destined for a church career, but he abandoned it and married a Norman noblewoman, Godehide of Tonsny. He received the county of Verdun in 1096, but he soon joined the Crusaders' army of his brother, Geoffrey of Bouillon, and became one of the most successful commanders of the First Crusade. Did you see that? So now let's go down and see who Baldwin's father was. It says Baldwin's father was Eustace II of Bologna. Once again, that's a hard name to pronounce, but as you see it, you can pronounce it. Let me know. But his name was Eustace II. His mother was Ida of Lorraine. So, okay, so we want to find out who his father is. Eustace II, Count of Bologna. That's a little closer. Eustace II was born in 1015 to 1087, also known as Eustace of Squenon, was Count of Bologna. He fought on the Norman side at the Battle of Hastings and afterwards received a large grant of land forming an honor in England. Now, the Battle of Hastings was between Mr. Goodwin. This is where my fiancée get her last name from, Goodwin. So now, I think it says the name down here further. Let me go ahead and see the name. Earl Goodwin and Swing Goodwinson. So this is where my fiancée gets her name from. But when you're dealing with Eustace was a son of, Eustace was the son of Baldwin I. Now we read about Eustace. It says in 1048, Eustace joined his father, joined his father-in-law, rebelling against the Emperor Henry III. The next year, and by the way, Edward I was the son of Henry III. Edward I was the one who created what they call the Statutes of Westminster in 1285, which established the so-called rule statute called De Donis Conditionalibus, which means that the land cannot be transferred but only to the heir. This was a law created to protect the so-called Jews who were expelled from England in 1290. So now let's go a little further. It says, the next year Eustace was excommunicated by Pope Leo IX for marrying within the prohibited degree of kinship. Eustace and Ida were both descendants from Louis II of France, and just within the prohibited seventh degree. However, since not all their ancestors are known, there might have existed a close relationship. The Pope's action was possibly at the behest of Henry III. The rebellion failed, and in 1049, Eustace and Geoffrey submitted to Henry III. Eustace visited England in 1051 and was received with honor at the court of Edward the Confessor. Edward and Eustace were former brothers-in-law and remained political allies. On the other side of the political divide, the dominant figure in England was Earl Godwin, who had recently married his son to the daughter of Eustace's rival, the Count of Flanders. Furthermore, Godwin's son, Sweden Godwinson, had been feuding with the Eustace stepson, Ralph the Timid, which actually we're going to read about, come from Herefordshire, where my name and my assistant Grand Sheik, Brother Sadiq, names come from. Okay, so we established that Baldwin I was the brother of Godfrey of Bouillon from the House of Flanders. His father was called Eustace II of Bouillon, who married Ida of Lorraine, the daughter of Godfrey III. Eustace II was married to Gada of England and Ida of Lorraine. He had two wives. So now we know that Eustace II was the father of Baldwin I. So now we want to find out who was the mother of Eustace II. He said part himself. Eustace was married to Goda of England. We want to find out who Eustace II's wife was. So let's find out who she was. Spouse, Goda of England. Okay. Goda of England, or Godgifu. And actually, etymologically, it means, it says it right here, gift of God, or God's gift. It says Goda of England, or Godgiftu, named Godgifu, or Godifu, meant gift of God. Godiva was a Latinized version in 1004 until 1047, and was the daughter of King Ethelred the Unready, and his second wife, Edma of Normandy, and his sister King Edward the Confessor. She married firstly Drogo of Mantus, Count of the Vexin, probably on the 7th April of 1024, and his son by him was named Ralph the Timid, Earl of Hereford. We just mentioned that. Once again, my name comes from Herefordshire. My assistant Grand Sheik names come from Herefordshire. Because if you read in question number 89 of the Prophecy and Hadith of Noble Jali, it clearly says that I missed my point. What was that? It'll come back to me. Forgive me for that. Well, we see here that Godgifu, daughter of Ethelred the Unready. So if she said she was the daughter of Ethelred the Unready, who was Ethelred the Unready? Let's find out who he was. Ethelred II, born in 966, on 23rd of April to 1066, until 23rd of April, which was in the year 1066, known as the Unready, was the king of England from 976 to 1013, and again from 1014 until his death, which was 1016. I said 1014 until his death in 1016. Remember, I told you I studied a little bit, so pardon self more. His epithet does not derive from the modern word unready, but rather from Old English meaning poorly advised. It is a pun on his name, which meant well advised. So now we understand that King Ethelred the Unready daughter was God or God's gift, was named Goda or Godgifu. So she was the daughter of King Edward Unready, and his father was King Edward the Peaceful, as we're going to see right here. It says his father, King Edward the Peaceful. King Edward the Peaceful, known as the Peaceful or Peaceable, was king of England from 959 until his death. He was the younger son of Edmund I, or El Gifu of Shaftesbury, and he came to the throne as a teenager following the death of his older brother, Edward. So now, who is King Edward the Peaceful? This gentleman right here, an Asiatic brother. Once again, this picture right here is on a stained glass window in Oxford. A stained glass window in Oxford. I'm going to show you it again. Give me 1 second. I showed you last time. That's King Edgar the Peaceful. He was the father of King Ethelred the Unready, whose son was Edward the Confessor. Edward the Confessor was the one who signed all the charters, and the Jews were under the jurisdiction of Edward the Confessor, the son of Ethelred the Unready, who was the son of King Edgar the Peaceful. Now, who was King Edgar the Peaceful the son of? Let's find out who that was. It says King Edgar the Peaceful, known as the Peaceful or Peaceable, was king of England from 959 until his death. He was the youngest son of Edmund the First. Let's go to Edmund the First. Edmund the First was the king of England from 939 until his death. His epiths include the Elder, the Deed-doer, the Just, and the Magnificent. As you can see, they show you a whitewashed picture of him. But as we know that those pictures were actually done so that they can erase the history of the actual tribes who were living as Afro-Asiatic, dark-complexioned people in that time and era. So now, if we read and go down a little further, it says that his burial, he died in Gloucestershire, England, and he was buried in Glaston Abbey. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But first of all, let's read about who he was. Edmund was the son of Edward the Elder and his third wife, Geoffery of Kent, and a grandson of Alfred the Great. His father died when he was young and was succeeded by the older son, Asherton. Did you hear that, brothers and sisters? He said he was succeeded by his older son, Asherton. Edmund came to the throne upon the death of his father in 939, apparently with little opposition. His reign was marked by almost constant warfare, including conquest or reconquest of the Midlands, Northumbria, and Strathclyde, the last of which was ceded to Malcolm I of Scotland. Edmund was assassinated after 6.5 years as king. While attending mass in Pocola Church, Gloucestershire, he was initially succeeded by his brother Edred, but his two sons, Edward and Edgar the Peaceful, both later came to the throne. So now it says that Edmund was the son of Edward the Elder, who was the grandson of Alfred the Great. So now, who is Alfred the Great? Let's go check him out. Alfred the Great means elf counsel or wise elf. Between 847 and 849, on 26th of October 899, was king of Wessex from 871 to 886, and king of the Anglo-Saxon from 886 to 899. He was the youngest son of King of Ethelwulf of Wessex. Now, these names you're hearing now are not rulers of kingdoms of England. These people you're hearing now were people who were actually creating the history for themselves when they were invaded by Scandinavians, i.e. Vikings. Because Alfred the Great was actually considered to be the first king of England, but he was not. Because there was no king crowned with an actual crown to King Edgar the Peaceful. He was the only king who wore an actual crown. Other kings prior to him had helmets on. So now, if you look at the same crown that Queen Elizabeth is wearing today, that's the same royal jewelry that was worn by King Edward the Confessor, who was the son of King Ethelred the Unready, who was the son of King Edgar the Peaceful, who was the son of Edmund I, who was the son of he was son of Edward the Elder, who was the son of Edmund I. We just read it for ourselves, Lord. And Edmund I was the son of Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great was married to what they call Elizabeth. We're going to go to her, as we see it here. His successor, his wife, spouse, Elizabeth. So now, this is a picture of Elizabeth, Moors, brothers. You see that? See how they try to whitewash it? Whitewash it? The other one you seen, they had it completely whitewashed. Let's go back and see if we can find that picture again. Right there. See how they whitewashed it? That was Edgar, this king right here. King Edgar the Peaceful. This was his father, Edmund I, as we see here. Edmund the First was the son of, let's go down here, I don't want to make any mistakes. Who was his father? Edward the Elder. Who was Edward the Elder's father? Was who? King Alfred the Great. Let me make sure to be on the safe side. Edward the Elder. His father was Alfred the Great, like I said. So we know that his mother's name was Elizabeth, as we can see, was whitewashed. Okay? So now we can see that she was whitewashed. Let's see who Asherton was. Let's see who Asherton was, because we're going to read about him. You find it here. It says, in 910, a Mercian and West Saxon army inflicted a decisive defeat on an invading Northumbrian army, ending the threat from the northern Vikings. Did I just mention that? I said Scandinavian Vikings. Ending the threat from the northern Vikings. In 910, Edward conquered Vikings ruled southern England in partnership with his sister Ethelfled, who had succeeded as Lady of Mercia following the death of her husband in 911. Historians dispute how far Mercia was dominated by Wessex during this period. And after Ethelfled's death in June 918, her daughter Elfwin briefly became second lady of the Mercians. But in December, Edward took her into Wessex and imposed direct rule on Mercia. By the end of 910, he ruled Wessex, Mercia, and East Anglia, and only Northumbria remained under Viking rule. In 924, he faced a Mercian and Welsh revolt at Chester, and after putting it down, he died at Forton in Cheshire on 17th of July, 924. He was succeeded by his eldest son, Asherton. So let's look at who Asherton was. Asherton or Asherton, Old North, means noble stone. He ruled from 894 to 939, which was 27th of October. He was a king of the Anglo-Saxon from 924 to 927 and king of the English from 927 to 939 when he died. He was the son of King Edward the Elder and his first wife, which was called Equin. Modern historians regard him as the first king of England and one of the greatest Anglo-Saxon kings. He never married and had no children. He was succeeded by his half-brother, Edmund the First. This is Asherton. See the white? Wow. So now, if we go back, who was his brother, Edmund the First? He was completely whitewashed. But as you can see, Asherton was not, as well as Alfred the Great's wife. She wasn't whitewashed. So now, all those kings and queens who lived in the time of the Middle Ages, i.e. called Dark Ages, were Berber tribes, Afro-Asiatic descent, who lived in peaceful tribes until they were invaded by Scandinavian Vikings. This is history. I didn't write it. I'm just repeating what they wrote. So now we established that from the time of 57 AD, which didn't really exist because we know that the Gregorian calendar didn't exist till 1582, by Pope Gregory XIII. So the only calendar they were using was the Berber, which was the time of 894 AD, because they switched from BC to AD in the year 951. 950 to the year 951. So now, mind you, this is the reign of this king, King Edgar the Peaceful. He was born in 943. He came to reign in the year 959. So this is why it says Unus Tunus, which means the year of our Lord. This was God, because what we said, Baldwin the First was related to who? Gata or Gagiful, which means God's gift, who was the daughter of King Ethelred the Unready, who was the son of there's lots you gotta remember more. She was the son of Ethelred the Unready, who was the son of King Edgar the Peaceful. Son of King Edgar the Peaceful. And we understand that this is King Edgar the Peaceful. So now, once again, prior to this king, no other king wore a crown. Why did he wear a crown? Because he was the only king to have a ring that was peaceful. He was called King of Peace, or King Edgar Jefferson, because the name Jefferson means peaceful place. So what was he ruling? His territory. Whatever he was ruling, his sires, i.e. counties, all of them, mind you, the first time the word sire was actually mentioned was the time of Edmund I. It was called Wapentake. If I'm spelling it right, W-A-P-N-T-A-K-E. Wapentake is another name for county, or i.e. shire. The first time that was actually created was under this king's father, Edmund I. Edmund I was the son of Edward the Elder, who was the son of Alfred the Great, who was married to Elthwith, who, as you can see, was whitewashed. Completely, well, she wasn't whitewashed. They tried to whitewash it, but you can see that they didn't succeed in doing that. So now I just brought you on the timeline from 57 BC all the way up to the year of 1706, when you're dealing with Queen Anne, because we know that the Kingdom of England ruled from what time? From 927, which was the time of this king right here, King Ashton, to the time of Queen Anne, who was the granddaughter of King James, because Charles I and Charles II were the sons of King James, and Charles II was Queen Anne was the niece of Charles II, who was the son of Charles I, who was the son of King James, the sixth of Scotland, and the first of England, or vice versa. But look them up, you can see it from yourself. Once again, it's a lot of stuff you have to remember, so this is why I'm giving you the tools to do the research to go back, because once again, you just don't want to be parakeeting something. You want to give the people something to edify themselves, to be able to go back and do the research so that they can do their cross-references. They can do their counseling out, because there's truth and falsehood in everything. So let's go to the Kingdom of England. All right? Give me 1 second. Kingdom of England. Let's type this in. Okay, here we go, brother. Kingdom of England. The Kingdom of England, Anglo-Norman and French, was a sovereign state on the island of Great Britain from 927, when it emerged from various Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, until 1707, when it united with Scotland in the former Kingdom of Great Britain. There goes your flag. There go their royal arms, royal banner. As you can see it, that's Anjou and Plantagenet, all under the jurisdiction of Geoffery. From Geoffrey I to Geoffrey V, Count of Anjou. But after that, they started warring. This is why Henry VIII destroyed the monastery. It's called dissolution of the monastery. This is when England thought it was the end of the world. Look this stuff up, brothers and sisters. It's about who you are. This is who we are, brothers and sisters. Check this out now. So now we know that the Kingdom of England was ruled from 927 to 1707. Why? Because this is Ashton. 927, this is where this king ruled. Let's go back to the date. You see it right there. Ring from 924 to 927. So we just closed the gap, brothers. We just closed, and sisters, we just closed the gap from the year 927 to the year 1707, which was all under the jurisdiction of the Kingdom of England. Kingdom of England. Until it switched to the Kingdom of Britain, which was under the jurisdiction of King George I. King George I was from the House of Hanover, which was under the Roman Empire. So now, once again, if King George was under the Roman Empire, under the House of Hanover, the Roman Empire was told, according to biblical time, to be in BC. But we know that did not exist. Why? Because the year BC did not come into under the Gregorian calendar to the year 1582 by Pope Gregory the 13th. Okay, so now let me take you to Jefferson family crest.
Don't forget, Grand Sheik. The noble. Don't forget to go to the English noble Berber That's it. That they talk about in the scrolls.
Yes, sir. Let me take you there first. Let me take you there first, brothers and sisters. Let's give you a little proof, brothers and sisters. All right. This article was written 27 October 2016. An African abbot in the Anglo-Saxon England. Abbot means priest. Abbey means church. They were called the Benedictine Monastery, which means the school of black monks. Look it up. Benedictine monks. It says an African abbot in Anglo-Saxon England. To commemorate Black History Month in the United Kingdom today, we remember one of the Africans to live in Anglo-Saxon England. The man in question was Hadrian, the abbot of St. Peter's in St. Paul's, Canterbury, who played a pivotal role in development of the church structure in what is now we call England. And you see the scroll. Hope y'all can see that. B's description of Hadrian, beginning column 2 to the second line 18 from his ecclesiastical history of the English people, England, Canterbury, 825. So we know that the Bible today comes from what we call ecclesiastical law or canon law, which is ruling what we call Witten or Wittenmont. If you look up the story of or the history of Wittenmont or Witten, it takes you to the story called Lords of the Ring, when Gandalf was ruler of a school. This is where Wittenmont comes from, wizardry. This is why they tell you in television, but we don't do the research or cross references, so we just roll right over our heads. But to make a long story short, this particular Asiatic Berber, it says, according to B's ecclesiastical history of English people, completed in 731, Hadrian was a very national affair, translated as a man of African race by Bertram Colegrave and R.A.B. Minoes, who spoke both Greek and Latin. Some scholars have suggested that Hadrian was a Berber and that he came from the area that is now, what? Libya. There are a series of biblical commentaries surviving in a manuscript in Milan that were derived from notes on Hadrian's teaching at his school at Canterbury. And these include references and vocabulary that was specific to North African. For example, there are notes on beautiful bird girls, Porfino said to be found in Libya. Okay, let's take you here now. Maurice, or Moor. Let's look up what the word Moor actually comes from. There we go. It's going to be a shock to some people. I hope y'all ready for this. It might hurt some people, but it shouldn't. Because you are what your forefathers were, without doubt or contradiction. So I'm going to read you two historical findings of the so-called term Maurice. As you can see, it says Maurice, historical family crest and coats of arms. The majestic county of France is the ancestral homeland of the distinguished surname Maurice. The earliest form of hereditary surname in France were the patronymic surnames, which are derived from the father given name, and metronymic surnames, which are derived from the mother given name. The patronyms were derived from a variety of given names that were of many different origins. The name Maurice was originally derived from an early Christian given name, Mauritius, which itself comes from the Phoenician word Moharam, meaning Easterner. Okay, let's give you the Welsh. Because we know that William the Conqueror was a Norman French. So we understand that the French, or the House of Anjou, was constantly trying to be overtaken by Norman French. This goes back to the House of Flanders, the House of Blois. We're going to get into that in my next lecture. But we understand that the kings of England, or from Welsh descent, or was constantly at war with the French, which was at one time ruled by all Afro-Asiatic Berbers. It says here, the Maurice surname comes from Old English French personal name introduced to Britain by the Normans. I just said it. The Latin version was Mauritus. It is also thought that the name may have been taken on as a nickname for a Moor or someone of a dark complexion who was not actually a Moor. Read it again. It says the Maurice surname comes from Old English personal name introduced into Britain by the Normans. The Latin version was Mauritus, and it is also thought that the name would have been taken on as a nickname for a Moor, that's English, or as someone of a dark complexion who was not actually a Moor. The surname Maurice was first found in Herefordshire, where traditions, according to the history Ormerod, find the family name to be descendants from Asherton, godson of Asherton, the king of England, who was founded the four royal tribes of Wales. Did you hear that? So we just established right there that the name Maurice or Moor was actually a nickname for somebody who was not actually Moor. They were Berbers. And the word Maurice goes back to the country, the county called Herefordshire, which goes back to Asherton, was ruled from 927 to 1706 by who? Asherton, all the way up to who? Queen Anne. This is why King James wrote the Bible, brothers and sisters. This is why he calls you Jews, because we read in the last lecture that the Jews first came into existence by William the Conqueror. Did you hear that? William the Conqueror. So we established that the Berber tribes are linked to Asherton, the king of England. So now, and is also originating in the shire called Herefordshire. So now I'm going to read to you the name of Jefferson, i.e. Geoffery, where the origin of that name comes from, which goes back to all the way back to the year 57 BC, according to Gregorian calendar, which we know is false, by Godfrey I, who goes back to the house of Anjou, known as the Andikavi, which was the name borrowed from the Andikavi, given to the name Anjou, which was actually trying to be distorted, which was actually restored by Godfrey V, known as the Plantagens, which has the coat of arms of the Plantagens in Anjou. Look it up, Moors. So let's look up the term Herefordshire. First of all, let's do my last name. Jefferson. Because when we read the last definition, it said, last lecture I did, it didn't give you the coat of arms. It just said the name means peaceful, and it said it did not originate in England. It derives from the coast of Africa, but it originated in England. So how did it get there? Now all of a sudden, now it's originated here in North America from the House of Plantagen, because Channel Islands is part of the House of Plantagen, known as Belwick of Jersey, which this is what I'm domiciled in, Belwick of Jersey, and what they call Middlesex Shire. Okay, Jefferson. Correct. Go. All right. Jefferson history, family crest, and coats of arms. Origin available English and Welsh. As you can see, what you see right there? Any other panther, a leopard, or a lion, or a cat? Because if you notice, the 22nd dynasty under Shusing II, it switched from a cat to a lion. Read it for yourself. It's called the Bubasite dynasty, known as the Cat Baz. Baz's consort was Ra, the sun. Look it up. The Bubasite dynasty. They were Berbers. They were called Egyptians, but they were not Egyptians because there was no calendar at that particular time. The only calendar that exists was called the Berber calendar, and it was called the Yanir. It was called the the Berber counter. Look it up. Look it up. Their flag is called Yen and Air, which is, parts of the New Year is Yen and Air, which is my birthday. January the 14th. They switched Yen and Air from January the 14th to January the 1st on the year I was born, 1970. It's called the units of time. When the clock went zero, all the clocks around the world hit zero on January the 14th, 1970. The Berber flag was created in the year 1970 by a Berber. His name was Musa. I forgot his first name. But look up the Berber flag, and to tell you that this flag was created in 1970 by the Berber Academy and Berber Academy Congress. And it was told he had to shut it down by Arabs. And they chased him because he had threats upon his life. So he had to what? Go to where? Channel Island, where he lived before he came home, before he died. So why would a Berber be going to Channel Island for protection? Because that was part of his jurisdiction, his territory, his estate, his ancestors, where he come from. He wasn't no foreigner going in for protection. They know who he was. It was just that they had so much what we call so many wars and so many people trying to take the identity away from them that he had to go find some type of asylum. And this is why he did what he did. So Herefordshire, Jefferson. Notice why we use the term territory. The Jefferson surname comes from the Norman personal name Geoffery of Godfrey. This name appears in Middle English as Geoffrey, in Old French Geoffroy or Geoffrey. Geoffridus and Geoffridius are early forms of the name. This indicates a Germanic first element derived from the either Gala, which means to sing, or Gaul, which means region or territory. The surname Jefferson also features the patronymic suffix son, which supersedes all other such suffixes. You hear that? Which supersedes all other such suffixes in popularity by the 14th century and was most common in north of Britain. The suffix was sometimes abbreviated to, you see that right there, /s. It says, early origin of the Jefferson family. The surname Jefferson was first found in Herefordshire, where they held their family seat from very ancient times. Some say well before the Norman conquest and the arrival of Duke William Hastings in 1060 AD. Did you hear that, Morris? So that's your estate. Oh, I know what I was looking for. Noor Ali said in Oral Statements 89, he says, do not throw away your slave names. Then he has in quotations English names, because they are your birthright. And he said the Europeans are going to have to pay back in compound interest for what they did to us in the time of slavery. I'm going to say it for you again. Question number 80 says that we are descendants of kings and queens. And the only kings and queens I know was the times of the ones ruling the kingdom of England. He also said, don't throw away your slave names, i.e. your English names. Because why? They are your key to your birthright, and they're going to have to pay back from compound interest. So he's telling you that the English surnames were your names, but they enslaved you and took those names from you and gave you some other name as Indians and Muslim names. No disrespect to the name, but that's not who you are, because you can only recognize by the land according to your status, i.e. English nationals. The only law can protect you is the law where your ancestors come from, and we just proved that the word Berber was from the tribes of the Anglo-Saxons. We proved that an African named Hadrian was living in the time of the times of England. We just also proved to you that the name Maurice, which is a name given to people identified as Moors but were not Moors, which lived in the time of Ashton, which was the first established, or the first king of England, which he was the son of Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great was married to Elizabeth, which you can see was whitewashed. You can clearly see that because of what? Vikings. You can do your research and see there were many invasions pertaining to the so-called because it takes you back to when we speak about the Antiquavi. This goes back to the time of Julius Caesar, 57 BC. So this is time of the so-called Phoenicians, Carthage, all that. Back in the Phoenicians' name for their god was Tanit. She had an with a crescent upon it. Back in Egypt, she was called, what was the name in Egypt? Well, part itself, not Egypt, but Berber culture. She was called, I forgot the name. You got forgive me for that. It'll come to me later. Like that just came to me. But let's get on a little further. So we understand the origin of Jefferson. We understand that it comes from ancient times. We understand that the name Jefferson means Godfrey. We also established that the word Godfrey was ruled by the house of Plantagen, which is the name, which is also the same house as Angevin, which is also the same house as Anjou, which goes back to the time of Julius Caesar, 57 BC, which was known as Anticavi, which the Anjou borrowed, which goes back to the time of the so-called Phoenicians, which was also a name given to us by so-called invaders, because we always have been Berbers, because the Berbers ruled from the 22nd dynasty, which was the year 943 on the Berber calendar. So it's mighty strange that in the year 943, Jefferson II was born, and 943 AD, King Edgar the Peaceful was born. That's 1,000 years. So every 1,000 years, a deity incarnates to bring the people back to who they are. And we understand that Jefferson II of 943 was part of the Bubasite dynasty, which was changed from a cat to a lion. And we know that Bas from the Bubasite dynasty consort was Ra. Ra means sun. Oh, I know Tanit. Tanit in Berber was called Min, which means water. That's why you come to the word remember. The word remember means Ra. The word Min means water. And the word Ber means fruit. So remember. Don't try to find out who you are. Just remember who you are. It's in your DNA. You never forgot it. They just don't want you to remember. Okay, so now we established that the Kingdom of England ruled from Amsterdam from 927 to 1706, which was called the Kingdom of England. Then it switched from the Kingdom of England to the Kingdom of Britain from 1714 by King George, from the House of Hanover, which was from the Roman. He was a Roman, which passed it over to who? Queen Elizabeth, which was called the United Kingdom. Okay, so now we know that all the so-called Kingdom of England, because Queen Anne, Kingdom of England moved from 927 to 1706, which was passed off to Queen Anne, who was the great-granddaughter of King James, the one who wrote the Bible. So now the Bible makes reference to the so-called Jews who will be delivered by the so-called Messiah. Because if you follow the Bible, in the last book of the Bible, and from the Old Testament, it was the book of Exodus when they were actually, Joshua received the commandment. Moses received the commandment. No, it was Joshua received the commandment. Now, there were books known as the extra books. I mean, part of not the extra, but known as the Hexator, which are the 5 books of the Bible, which the Bible comes from. And if you look at that book, it shows you the origin that was written by what they call Elphick of Isham. Elphick of Isham studied in what they call under the authority of Dustin, who ruled in the time of what they call Asherton, who was, like I said, the brother of Edmund I, who was the son of Edward the Elder, who was the sons of Alfred the Great. Okay, so now we know that the Jews were written in the Bible and they were supposed to be redeemed by some Redeemer. So let's go to the history of the so-called Jews. Just had it. I'll make sure I have the supporting things to make sure that it be clearer and it be on point. I hate to do this to you, trying to get this to. I got some information on this phone that sometimes it just does that.
Peace to the family. Hold up for a few. The Grand Sheik trying to get this right.
It's definitely important, brothers and sisters. I apologize for the delay.
This is some beautiful information to the family. It's beautiful. It's rest assured in regards to again taking you back from where this law stuff and little property and stuff coming down from, you know, so you can connect law and status together in order to be able to rest assured that you'll be able to stand on a solid foundation to where you'll be able to claim property and stuff like that, because we definitely putting that stronghold on these courtrooms and these magic